Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. Looks like I went back one. For our second Planning for Recovery series from the Chamber of Commerce, Sustaining Work from Home and Employee Sick Leave Implications of the CARES Act. We have Tricia from the Chamber on the line, and she wanted to speak to us really quickly about the series. Go ahead, Tricia.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Leia?
Yep.
Okay. I would just like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Chamber. I'd like to thank Leia from InTech as well as the team from Tremba, Kinney. This is all valuable information for our members, and I just want to thank you for your willingness to share your knowledge and insights with our business community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tricia. We really appreciate this opportunity. The reason why we decided to do this was truly to be able to get relevant, important and vital information to our businesses in Westmoreland County and throughout the greater Pittsburgh area as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, so we can make decisions in order to not just save our businesses right now, but figure out how to pivot, how to thrive, and make sure that we're making the right choices and decisions. So to do this, we got together everybody who doesn't know me. I'm Leia Shilobod. I'm the CEO of InTech Solutions here in Greensburg. We also have on the line with us today Larry Kerr from Tremba, Kinney, Greer and Kerr, and also John Greer. And we have in addition, they have a couple more people on their team who are also here. We've got Brittany and Chelsea as well. So we have an entire team of people here to be able to answer questions having to do with the CARES Act sick leave implications. Today, we're going to, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about crisis planning for the next 30 to 90 days to position your business to weather the storm, as well as ways to keep your employees well and connected so they continue to work and produce for your business during these very uncertain times. And then Larry's firm is going to review the new leave regulations outlined in the CARES Act, things that you must know and understand, and the implications for that, and possibly how people might end up taking advantage of that and what you can do about it. So if we're thinking about work from home, or even if you are an essential business and still have a place of business, strategically, where are we right now? Right now, if you think about the phases of crisis planning or crisis, responding to a crisis, the first phase is defense, which most of us have already moved through that, into stabilization. So we're stabilizing where we are right now in one form or another. And the next place to move in from here is to reset and go on the offensive to really take advantage of this time. Before we go any further, I did want to mention that we have a Q&A section here on Zoom that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. As we are going through the presentation, if you have specific questions about anything that we're covering, please put that in the Q&A and we will be sure to answer it at the end of the call. I get asked this a lot, how long is this going to last? The truth is that nobody really knows, but a lot of us have many sometimes politically charged or emotionally charged ideas about that. But you still have to make decisions and you have to figure out where we're going, even though we don't have really good information about what this is going to look like long term. I had the opportunity to be able to jump on a call with Jack Stack. He's he owns a manufacturing business. He's also the author of The Great Game of Business. He's been through many downturns throughout the course of being in business since the 80s. And he's saying that historically he sees the downturns last about 120 days on average, or about 4 months. So that's what we're doing at my company. We are being conservative and we are crisis planning for 120 days. So what kind of crisis planning are we doing and what I recommend for you to do? The first is create financial models in a best case scenario, with us starting to have a correction in the market and in our businesses economically by June 1. That's our best case. I think middle case is going to be about July, and worst case scenario would be August, 120 days. And also make those financial models with and without the loans and aid, because as we've all been seeing, it's possible that some of these monies will run out, that it will take a significant amount of time for us to be able to get that money. And so consider these financial models with that aid and without that aid coming, so that you can be properly prepared. Also have a model for pivoting or evaluating opportunities. Do you have to make a pivot right now? Do you have to change what you're doing, what you're thinking, in order to survive this time? Many companies are doing this very well by looking at the needs of the market and making those pivots. And if you notice that right now you have a lot of opportunities, which ones do you pursue? You need some sort of a model to be able to identify which opportunities you should pursue at this time. Also take this time to have key conversations. Who should you be having those key conversations with? Certainly with your clients, your existing clients and customers. So we've actually, at my company, we've been talking to our clients right now about where they are. We helped them to get to a place where they're working from home, trying to make sure that we are that we didn't miss anything, getting them on the work from home, talking about, can we sustain this for 90 days? Do we have to make any other kinds of changes? And how are you doing? And what can I do to help you? And the conversation is not just about technology. It's about who can I link you with? Who's valuable for your business right now to be able to link you with? The key conversation to have right now. Talk to your vendors. If there's people that you're concerned that you can't pay, have that conversation. It's better to be able to have those kinds of things shut up to the light than get into a bad place. Step up the key conversations you're having with your confidant, that person that gets you, that understands you, that knows where you are with your business, maybe a couple times a day, sometimes maybe just to unload, and other times to be able to work out problems. And also having the key conversations with your team. And for the technology, do you have the right technology in place to support your people and processes for the next 120 days? And if you don't, what do you have to add or change? So I wanted to remind everyone, these are some of the key changing business processes you need to be looking at during this time if you haven't done this already. And if you're going to sustain what you're doing, either remote, work from home, or whatever your new model is, here are some items to be considering, either changing or adding during this time, to make sure that during the next 90 to 120 days that this is working for you. Your video conferencing solution, phone, data sharing, application access, and how you're communicating internally. How you're communicating internally is incredibly important during this time, because people are afraid, people are confused, and you need to make sure that they keep their head in the game. These are some ideas that for resetting and sustaining your team during this time. Communicate more. You cannot over communicate internally with your team. At InTech, what we've done is we have always had a daily huddle. So every day at 8:30, we jump on a huddle and we align for the day what our priorities are, so everybody understands where everybody's going to be and what they're doing. We've added gratitude, or what's your gift that you're finding from this quarantine. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but in every bad situation, or it was perceived to be bad, there are amazingly good things happening. Share those things with your team. We're also reading a passage from the Daily Stoic. I happen to be a student of Stoic philosophy. I'm sharing that with my team every day. Sometimes we're doing a reading from Vitamin B and Vitamin B for Business by my friend Andy Bailey, as something to reflect on and focus on during the day. Launch transformational projects during this time. you know, what's interesting is the other day when I was on a call with John DeJulius, he's the author of the Customer Service Revolution. In his company, he has both a consulting company that does customer service consulting, then he also has a series of spas and salons in the Cleveland area. And he said one of the great things about this time is that it's giving us the opportunity to launch some of those transformational projects that we've been backburnering for a long time. I'm sure everyone here has it, things, internal processes, procedures, things that you wanted to be able to change. Now is the time to pull those out, give your people those kinds of goals and missions during this time. We also do an evening check-in at InTech, just kind of like to gauge everyone's temperature at the end of the day. One word or phrase, how you're feeling, real quick, move right through it. And also, is there anything the team needs to know for tomorrow so that you don't roll into the next day and be surprised? When you have a dispersed team, and especially if you're not used to working that way, it's so important to be able to get these communication rhythms down so that you guys can continue to pulse together and get work done, and that your workflows can be smooth. And the last thing that I really recommend is an employee wellness plan of some kind. At InTech, we have a set of principles that are our core values. And every day we're talking about those core values, those principles, and we're reporting on like where we're seeing them demonstrated throughout our company, and having that as a key motivator to keep us all aligned. Also, what kinds of things can you do for the families of your team? For instance, we bought everybody masks, and we've been doing some fun drop-offs at people's houses of baskets and things of that nature. Anything that you can do to continue to show that you really care about the people that you're working with. We also implemented some mandatory breaks during the day, telling everyone to take the time at lunch to get away from your computer, decompress a little, get some movement and breathing. We have an entire plan about that's published, and everybody understands this is what we do so that we can stay well during this time. Because some people are stuck at home with people that they love very much, but during this time, love them a little less. And it's really understandable. Sometimes people are stuck at home with people that they don't like at all right now. And that's really real. And we should accept that as a reality and do whatever we can to support our team, because they are the ones that are going to help us get through this time. Also, I want to make sure that I mention to everyone to not forget about cybersecurity. Hackers are taking advantage of the fear and the confusion right now. So imagine during, during regular times when a business email compromise for somebody, a hacker might get into your bank account and drain it then, that being a real tough place to be in. Can you imagine right now when you're trying to conserve cash if your entire bank account was drained? It's happening. Business email compromise is up over 7 times in the last 30 days alone. So it's a time to really stay vigilant. The number of scams are significantly increasing. They're using lots of tactics to try to get you to click on things like, COVID cures, any kind of, anything that's hot right now in the media. They're sending out scams about that, and funding clickbait, because there are people who are very desperate right now for some kind of funding to save their businesses. Make sure that your people are trained in what to look for, and they understand that this is still a real threat, and in fact have gotten worse. So at this time, I'm going to roll over to the implications of the CARES Act. If you hang on one second, then we're going to change up our presentation, and I'm going to introduce John and Larry. So hang on one second for me. Okay. I'd like to introduce today John, Brittany, and Chelsea. Can you
Hi,
guys
Leia. Can you hear me, Leia?
You guys hear me okay? I can, yes.
Okay. Apparently I'm having a technical issue. Nobody needs to see my face anyway, but I can take it from here on the audio. This is probably a blessing in disguise.
Fantastic.
If you saw me, you'd lose your audience. Okay, my name's Larry Kerr. I'm a lawyer here in Greensburg, and I'm with the law firm of Tremba, Kinney, Greiner, and Kerr. And you can see some of our names there. We're all in the same law firms. So what we're going to do, there are 4 lawyers on the phone, so at least for the next 40 minutes or so, the billing lights on, you're going to get a bunch of free legal advice, hopefully you can use. What I'm going to do is go through the slides, explain sort of the HR aspects of the new laws, and I'm going to go through the slides quickly and put it open to questions, and we'll take your individual questions at the end, and one of us is sort of a subject matter expert on each aspect of the law, and we'll give you an answer right now. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, these are your typical lawyer weasel words. We have to give a disclaimer because we're in a really weird situation with these new HR laws. Normally, when Congress passes a federal statute, and then it gets turned over to the executive agency to interpret it, in this case, Department of Labor, the agency has a long time to write the regulations, giving examples and fleshing everything out and making it clear, because usually the statute is pretty bare bones. Well, as you know, we're in a stampede here. Everybody's doing everything quickly. And so we're sort of in a limbo. Congress passed the law in March. We'll talk about that, but the regulations haven't even been written yet. And so we're in the limbo where the lawyers are basically trying to guess how the courts will eventually interpret the regulations, which haven't even come out yet. But we think we have a pretty good idea. We think we have about a 90 or 95% accuracy rate, but I had to put up those weasel words saying we're not 100% sure because the regulations aren't out yet. Okay, the law went into effect March 18. Well, that was when it was signed. It goes into effect April 1st, and you guys need to know that, because if you made a mistake interpreting these new laws prior to April 1, you can't be sued for it, because the law does not go into effect until April 1, even though it was actually passed on March 18. Now, it says 2 types of leave. Okay, I'm going to be specific because there's a little bit of confusion about what the CARES Act is and what these laws are. There were 3 laws that were passed on March 18, okay? 2 of them were sort of HR laws. They pertain to leave. And you see at the bottom of the screen there, one was the Family and Medical Leave Act expansion. That's one of the HR laws that was passed in March and went into effect April 1. And the other one is the Paid Sick Leave Act. They kind of go together. There's some overlap, but they're independent laws. The other one, the third one, was the CARES Act. And as you know, the CARES Act is pretty much a financial law, and it pertains to loans and getting your money back from the Department of the Treasury. And even though Leia told me that you guys had a class on that not too long ago, at the end of our presentation, we'll touch on some of the CARES laws because they kind of tie into these 2 HR laws. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, who do these laws apply to? And this is pretty important because they kind of take the regular laws that were already on the books and which are still on the books, and Congress flipped them around. Generally, small businesses had exemptions to laws like the FMLA. Okay, under the FMLA, you have to have more than 50 employees before you have to give FMLA leave. So if you have under 50 employees, and I'm sure a lot of the chamber members do, you don't have to put up with the FMLA. This new twist on the FMLA expansion laws, flips that around. Employers who have more than 500 employees don't have to comply with it. What that means is employers who have less have to comply with it. So not only didn't small businesses get an exemption, but it only applies to small businesses, okay? It applies to not-for-profit employers. You can't get out of it just because you have a not-for-profit organization. And it applies to public agencies regardless of how many employees. Now, there are some exemptions, and they're not on your slide because we can only cover so much, but I'll touch on them very quickly. Number one, if your company is in the healthcare industry, you may be totally exempt from these laws. And when I say maybe, there's a little bit of ambiguity. One way you can read the law is you got to do it on an employee by employee basis. In other words, if you're a doctor or if you're a nurse, you're definitely a healthcare worker and you're exempt. But then the other way of looking at it is if you have a nursing home company or you're in the health business, does that healthcare exemption apply to everybody in your company, to the secretaries, to the receptionists? And I'm sorry to say that the regulations haven't been put out yet, and the lawyers like us are trying to give us, give the best guess as to how it will eventually be applied. The smart money, the betting now seems to say, if your company is in the healthcare business, your entire company is exempt, which would be good news for any of the members that are in the healthcare business. You might not have to comply with any of these laws because you're totally exempt. I think that's the smart money, although unfortunately, because we're in a stampede and the courts haven't had a chance to flesh this out and the regulations haven't been written, it's not 100% certain on that, but the smart money says if you're in the healthcare business, you're totally exempt. Another exemption, which you may have heard about or read about on the internet, is if you have 50 or fewer employees, and if having to give somebody, one of your employees, the special leave, paid leave that we're going to talk about, will, quote, jeopardize the viability of your business as a going concern, end quote, then you don't have to comply with it. Well, as soon as my corporate small business clients hear that, they go, well, holy mackerel, if I have to give everybody off or you pay them or whatever, yeah, that's going to hurt my bottom line. That's not the standard. We don't think that's going to be the standard. We think the standard for getting out of that under the 50 and under exemption is a real heavy burden. And you're probably going to have to convince Department of Labor, if you get cited for it and you guess wrong, or if you eventually get sued for this and you guess wrong, you're going to have to convince either Department of Labor or the courts that you not complying, not giving this paid leave just wasn't a hardship. Just didn't hurt your bottom line, because obviously it's going to hurt everybody's bottom line, but it pretty much would have put you out of business. Okay. And so I have a lot of our clients are saying, hey, that applies to me too. This is really going to hurt. I'm having trouble making payroll. If I give everybody this leave and have to pay them and they're not working very hard, I have less than 50 employees. I don't have to comply. Well, you better document everything. And that's what all the so-called legal experts are saying right now. If you're going to take a shot at that exemption, you better document it, because if you get sued a year later and somebody calls you on it, you're going to have to say, okay, this is why I didn't give this person leave or whatever, because it really would have hurt my business in the following reasons. Another question we get is, like I said, a lot of businesses know about this 50 and under exemption. Do you have to get like a formal written exemption from Department of Labor before you can say, no, I don't want to have to, I'm not going to comply with this? And Department of Labor has made it very clear, they don't want to hear from you. So you can call them up or you can email them and say, hey, here's my criteria. I have 50 or less, and this is going to put an economic hardship on me. Will you send me an email or something saying I don't have to comply? Department of Labor is officially saying, no, we can't tell you that. We don't have the assets to do that. So don't even contact us. Don't even ask us that. Well, that puts you in a heck of a tough position, because you have to guess. And it's clear that's Department of Labor's position right now. It's kind of self-policing. You have to determine on your own whether you think you meet that threshold of jeopardizing the viability of your business. And you have to make a call, And hopefully, you don't get sued on it. That employee who you didn't give leave to doesn't sue you, and hopefully Department of Labor doesn't try to cite you for that. Because they're not going to tell you ahead of time, yeah, we're putting it in writing, you don't have to comply, you're certified, don't worry about it. It puts you in a terrible position. When I first saw that, I thought, well, Department of Labor is being a real jerk. They ought to give you something in writing. They shouldn't make you guess. Well, now that I think about it, I understand why DOL's in that position. They're totally swamped. If they entertained written applications, they'd be drowned with millions of applications in one day. So I guess I understand Department of Labor's position, although it kind of it's very difficult for businesses. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, as I said, these are two HR laws. One is the Family and Medical Leave Expansion, the FMLAE, and the other one is the Paid Sick Leave Law. This slide covers both, and it talks about how you count employees. And as you can see on the slide, full and part-time employees are counted. They're counted the same. Employees who are working and on leave are counted. Temporary employees are counted, and day laborers are counted. And the count is made as of when the leave is initiated. So you can't get out of this just by saying, well, the employee's part-time or whatever. Just about everybody counts. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is the expanded FMLA, okay? And one thing, you got to keep in mind that the regular FMLA, and again, the regular FMLA, which is still in effect, it's been in effect since 1990, that only applies if you have 50 or more employees, and if you've dealt with it, you have to deal with terms like what is a serious health condition, and you got to get a certification of such from the doctor. That law is still in effect. The temporary expansion, which went into effect on April 1 and has a sunset at the end of the year, that doesn't replace the old FMLA. The FMLA is still there. So you have to comply with the regular FMLA, and you have to comply with this new FMLA. And as you can see, the new FMLA gives an employee up to 12 weeks of leave. The first 2 are unpaid, but hang on to that, because the second HR law, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, will make up for that, because they can get the first 80 hours paid. But under this one of 2 FMLA laws that were passed, the first 2 weeks are unpaid. The remaining 10 weeks are paid at 2/3 of the rate of regular pay, okay? The employee only gets one set of 12 weeks in 1 year. Now, what's the qualifying reason? And this is confusing because it has the word FMLA in this law, but the old FMLA, which is still in effect, that has completely different qualifying reasons. You got to have a serious health condition like pregnancy or cancer or something like that. This new expanded temporary FMLA law, okay, has a different criteria. And the criteria is the need to care for a child who is home due to a school or place of care closure or unavailability of child care provider. Well, you're probably thinking, well, holy mackerel, here in Pennsylvania, that pretty much applies to everybody, because all these kids can't go to school, and the schools are suspended. And yeah, I mean, this is a pretty broad reach. Okay, so you really got to pay attention to this, because there's a lot of exposure. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, paid sick leave. Okay, now this is the second part of the law. Again, these are 2 HR laws. They're standalone laws. They kind of complement each other. Why Congress just didn't put them in one integrated law, I have no idea. Nobody's been able to explain. But this is a law that you heard about that says that you have to give 80 hours of paid leave, the first 80 hours, okay? Now, the qualifying reasons for the first 80 hours of paid leave are a lot broader than the FMLA expansion law that we talked about in the previous slides. Just to go down them real quick, it says if the employee is unable to work or telework due to the need for leave because of the employee, and any one of these has to apply. Subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order, well, there you go. We have the Governor Wolf's order, so that applies to to a lot of kids, and a lot of people have to stay home as a result of that order. Or the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, or is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking medical diagnosis. And I remember when Leia and I talked about teaching this class, and I talked about a couple of concepts. Leia said, you know, if you have an employee who really isn't conscientious and doesn't have a lot of integrity, they could game the system. They could play with this. And I think that number 3 is the devil's playground for an employee who wants to do that. Because if you read number 3, you realize that you got to give paid leave, first 80 hours of paid leave, to an employee who doesn't even have a diagnosis or doesn't even have a doctor's slip. As long as the employee says, you know, I think I have a fever, chills, diarrhea, whatever, and I'm trying to go see my doctor. But my doctor is kind of booked up and they're telling me I might not be able to get in for 3 or 4 days or whatever, and I want to stay home and get paid. They qualify. And so I think that could be the devil's playground for a dishonest employee. And I think most employees are very conscious and conscientious, are not going to game the system. But take a look at number 3. You know, put yourself in the mind of an employee who wants to game the system, and you can see they can get away with it. Number 4 is caring for an individual subject to an order described in either 1 or 2. Number 5 is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed. That's what I said, you know, applies to a lot of people because just about all the schools are going to close. Or number 6 is experiencing any other substantially similar condition. That's kind of a catch-all, and DOL has given us no guidance so far, so number 6 means nothing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, how much money do they get? How much pay? Okay, for the first 4 reasons on the previous slide, they get a full rate of pay, but there's a cap, not to exceed $511 per day and a total of $5,110. Now, for reason number 5, they get 2/3 of their rate of pay, or 2/3 of the minimum wage, which is whichever is higher, not to exceed $200 a day and $2,000 total. Okay, duration of leave for the first 4 qualifying reasons, and 680 hours for full-time employees. Part-time employees, you see it right there, eligible for the number of hours of leave that the employee works on an average over a 2-week period. And for reason 5, you got a little bit of a different rate of pay, 2 weeks of paid sick leave, followed up by 10 weeks of leave from the FMLA expansion. So when you put these 2 HR laws together, the employee could conceivably get the first 80 hours paid for by the first law, and then the remaining 10 weeks paid for by the FMLA expansion. So an employee can get 12 weeks of paid leave. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Intermittent leave. Okay, if it couldn't get any more complicated, it has, because they don't have to take this leave all in big chunks. They can take it, they can't break down it into a day. They can't say, well, I want to take 4 hours on Monday and 6 hours on Tuesday, but they can spread it out, okay? In fact, it's so complicated, the variations are so complicated that the DOL and the regulations say, well, you know, we know it's complicated. If an employee says, you know what, I want to take Monday off and then Thursday because of this reason or whatever, and so DOL encourages the employer and the employee to sit down and try to be reasonable. That's nice to say, but to a lawyer, that really doesn't mean anything to us. You could drive a truck through that loophole. So when the lawyers read that, we kind of chuckled and said, yeah, we're dealing with the law here. Adverse parties are going to sit down and try to be reasonable. Good luck with that. If the employee is teleworking, the intermittent leave may be taken in any increment. It must be properly documented. The employee must notify the employer of intended leave. But if the employee is in the office, it's only permitted to take intermittent leave if the leave is due to caring for a child who is at home due to a school or place of care being closed or a child care provider being unavailable. You're not allowed to take intermittent leave if it's due to any of the other qualifying reasons under the Act. Okay, let's go to number 10. Okay, now I talked kind of fast. I understand we only have 60 minutes and I'm trying to cover a lot of ground, but the good news is most of what I said is summarized in this official Department of Labor poster. And so this slide here, this poster, is important for that reason, and it's important for another reason. This is a two-edged sword. Part of the law that went into effect on April 1st said that employers must either post or distribute this official poster. And that's an independent legal requirement in and of itself. I'm sure most of the members out there have some all-in-one poster where they put up all these notifications, you know, overtime, minimum wage, workers' comp, you know, civil rights, blah, 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 blah. This is kind of one of those posters. So just like there's a legal requirement to post all that other stuff and you're all in one poster, this has to be posted too. Now, Department of Labor understands that a lot of people aren't even reporting to work. So they've said in their advisory notes that if you email this, that is the same thing as posting it. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difficulty here for employers because probably a lot of employees don't know about all these ways they could game the system. And you're probably thinking, well, heck, if I email this to them, they may read this and go, holy mackerel, I can play around with this. Well, and that's why the law says you don't have a choice. You have to give it to them. It's a violation if you don't give them this notice. So where can you get this? If you don't already have one, just go onto Google and Google FFCRA poster or Department of Labor coronavirus poster, any of those combinations, and this will be your first hit. And you can just print that out and post it. Okay, now we're going to go to the next slide here. This is kind of getting into the CARES Act. I'm sorry.
Okay, Larry,
Yeah.
hang on one moment for me. I apologize. I have I'm noticing that the amended presentation that you sent is not what I've got here. So hang on one sec for me while I grab that for you. Okay.
Okay. Take time. Take your time.
Yeah. Yeah. We have just a tad little bit of technical difficulties that I will claim is my fault. No problem. But while that's happening and I grab that, could you I'll
start to talk about it.
Answer this question real quick.
Yes, sure.
They have a question here about if the operational hours are drastically reduced. So somebody who was usually paid 40 hours a week, they're now at 15 hours a week. Would they still have to pay them for the 40 or now the decreased amount of time?
I'm going to give my super smart associate, Chelsea, a shot at that one. Take it away, Chelsea.
All right.
Chelsea? Huh. I think Chelsea isn't linked. Just give me a second, Leia, okay?
Sure.
Hey, Chelsea? Chelsea? Yeah. Chelsea's having difficulties too with her phone.
Oh.
I don't think I'm unmuted.
Okay. Shoot that question again. I don't want Chelsea to get off the hook.
Okay. The question was that the employees were originally working 40 hours a week. Now they're decreased to 15 hours a week. And what if they took leave? How much time would they need to be paid for?
They would still have to do the up to 80 hours a week. That's what the mandated amount of time is. So it wouldn't be just 2 weeks. It would be 80 hours total.
I see. Okay. All right.
Agree, Larry?
Yes.
All right. And here we go. We're on slide 11. How about that?
We can field some of these other questions when you're.
All right, we're back.
Okay.
Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act.
Okay.
Here we go.
this is the so-called CARES Act, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leia, you guys went over this in a prior class, right?
We did,
Well,
and I think that.
Do you want me to review? I only have a couple more slides. Do you want me to go over this in case they tie in, or do you just want me to start to field questions on the HR laws?
Well, well, the ways that this would tie into these HR laws would be good to understand too. Like, you know, are the employers, do we just have to foot this bill of paying people 80 hours to not work?
Right. Okay. Well,
or, you know, can we use this? Go ahead.
Let me go through. Let me minimize this here, and go through the so-called CARES Act. Okay. You can see that the CARES Act, and this was, even though it was passed on March 27th, it's one of the 3 laws that went into effect in March that deal with either when you have to pay an employee leave or how you get reimbursed or subsidized from the government after you've done that. So the CARES Act went into effect March 27th. Next slide, please. That's the paycheck. There you go. You probably heard this. That's the Paycheck Protection Program. And by the way, my partners, John Greiner and Brittany, who are on the line here, they're pretty much experts on this. And so when if you have questions on this, we'll field the questions. The
Okay.
PPP, as it's called, provides 8 weeks of cash flow assistance through federally guaranteed loans. Who qualifies? Small businesses, small proprietorships, nonprofits, all with not more than 500 employees. We'll go to the next slide. It says PPP loan uses. There you go. What can you use it for? Payroll cost, interest on mortgage, utilities, rent. But these obligations must have been in existence as of February 15, 2020. Okay. What are payroll costs? Salary, wage, commission, vacation, parental, family, medical or sick leave, severance pay. I got a question from a client the other day. They separated somebody. They wanted to know the severance pay. Can you get reimbursed for that? The answer is yes. Payment required for provisions of group health care benefits, insurance premiums, retirement benefits, state and local taxes. Federal taxes not included. Okay, just a couple more slides. Next one is the PPP loan forgiveness. Okay, there you go. 25% of loan forgiven for a payment on mortgage, interest, rent, utilities. 75% of the loan for payroll expenses, and forgiveness can be reduced for reductions in the workplace or employee compensation. There's 2 more slides here. Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL. You get that directly from the Small Business Association, up to $10,000 advance within 3 days of the application. 10-year repayment period. You get a good interest rate, 3.75. Sometimes you got to personally guarantee it. And then, okay, I think we're at the end now. And now we'll go to the questions.
Larry, before we do that,
yeah, go ahead.
I have a little bit of a news flash that relates to the PPP loans and the EIDL loans.
Okay.
Just about 2 minutes before we started this conference call, I got an alert from NPR, and the Small Business Administration has announced that the funding for PPP loans has been exhausted. They only spoke to, or at least the article only spoke to PPP loans. So I got on the SBA's website, and sure enough, the funding for the EIDL loans has also been exhausted. So if you've got your application in for either of these, hopefully you're in the pipeline to be approved. The director of the SBA, in their announcement, urged Congress to act promptly to provide additional funds. So the next step really is for everyone who hasn't gotten a loan, hasn't qualified yet, we've got to push Congress to allocate more funding to help all of the small businesses that are affected by this. And also keep an eye out on the Pennsylvania Industrial Development website as well. They have been offering some loans, but the terms and conditions aren't nearly as favorable as the 2 loans that are offered through the SBA.
Wow.
Okay, so that's really heavy. Thank you for that update.
I'm sorry it's
John.
so heavy too.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I had to give you the weasel words in the beginning about how all this is subject to change. I didn't think it would change in 40 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we are in that time right now where everything is changing way more faster than we could have ever imagined. So I just, as a point of clarification then, if you get the PPP funds, you can use those funds to cover some of this leave if your employees take the leave. Is that correct?
Yes, you can. That's
Okay.
one of the allowable uses for the PPP loans, your
Okay.
payroll. And you can
Okay.
you can get forgiveness of the loan for payroll costs up to 75% of the amount of the loan. There's a very very complicated formula for how forgiveness is calculated. And unfortunately, we don't have firm SBA guidelines on that yet. So the short answer is, how does forgiveness work? Stay tuned.
Okay. Okay. And but if the monies do run out, and as they have, and there's no additional money, and you don't get that funding, you still, as an employer, have to cover the 80 hours, for instance, or the 2/3 pay out of your own pocket. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to speak for Larry there. That's really more of his realm. I guess I beat him to the punch, but yes.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, because they're
Okay.
standalone laws. But I think that my guess is Congress is going to have some emergency funding for those laws, or else the country's going to fall apart.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but
It'd be very difficult for some of them.
Yeah, that's kind of shocking. Okay.
So
Go ahead,
a couple
Leia.
of quick from our audience. We have an attendee that asked if do they have to post the poster that you showed. By the way, we do have a copy of that, and for all attendees, we're going to be sending that out to you, so you will have access to that. So you could email it also to your team.
Right.
The question, though, about the poster is if you have over 500 employees, do you still have to post it?
No, you don't. The law doesn't apply.
Okay.
The law doesn't apply.
Okay, great. So the next question by Greg Walker, we've been previously instructed that the stay-at-home orders from Governor Wolf do not meet the definition of quarantine or isolation, in quotes, as per the CDC, and thus the first point of paid sick leave requirement is not met. Are you in agreement with that stance?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right.
I mean, wait, let me parse that out a little bit. When you say, I think we're mixing apples and oranges. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it particular to an employee, since that's who we're dealing with. So in this hypothetical by Greg's, I'm assuming he's looking at Wolf's general stay-at-home order. In other words, if you don't have a job where you're indispensable, like healthcare worker, or you're not leaving home for a permitted reason, do you have to be paid? Is that George's question, or are we talking about somebody who was actually diagnosed and quarantined? I'm not really sure I understand his question.
I think it is in relation to the paid sick leave requirement that I think that what you're saying is this is a law, and so it doesn't matter what it's a federal law, so it doesn't really matter what the governor says so much.
Hold on, we're gonna analyze this here. Okay, paid
Okay.
leave, number one, is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID. Okay, and I get that, but I'm trying to see which particular order of. Why don't you help me with that? Which order?
Just the stay-at-home order that Governor Wolf has issued. You're asking if that would be something to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do qualify. I do. I don't know who the previous instruction was, but I would respectfully disagree with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair. And then, of course, if they have, they could take that back to their counsel
Right.
if they
Yeah.
have a severe question about that. All right, another question. You have an employee out for childcare at the 2/3 pay. Could you lay them off so they can earn more money?
Employee out for childcare. Out for childcare. Yes, if you have, well, put it this way, these laws have anti-retaliation protection. So if an employee says, I can't work because I have to take care of my kid and I'm entitled to be paid, and in retaliation you fire them, then you're violating the law and you're going to get sued. On the other hand, if you have an employee in that position and they agree to be laid off because they can earn more money, then number one, you don't have to pay them, and number two, they can't sue you because you've agreed to that. So that's the answer to that question.
And that should be in writing.
Yeah.
Additionally,
Okay.
you can agree to work with the employee to, if they have any PTO time, they can use that to supplement this time, and they could go up to their full rate of pay with that PTO time.
Yeah. As far as retaliation, let me throw in a useful piece of information. I watched the run up to this legislation all through March, and I got seasick watching it bouncing back and forth between the House and the Senate, because every time it got changed. And up until the last 24 hours, none of these laws had teeth in them, because the only person who could enforce this was Department of Labor. In other words, you get a citation, so what? And at the last hour, Congress inserted the right for personal lawsuits on all of these statutes at the last minute, just when I convinced myself I didn't have anything to worry about. And so the danger is, and this would arise if you lay somebody off in retaliation for them using one of these laws, or if you said no and then they quit or whatever. The danger is that 6 months later your company could be personally sued for violating these laws. And so what the lawyers are predicting behind the scenes, what we're chatting about, is that there's going to be like a delayed reaction with all these lawsuits. So again, you want to take it seriously. Me and my partners aren't here to drum up business, but if I'm you, before you actually fire somebody, okay, because you think they're milking one of these laws, I would run that termination by a lawyer first, because if you don't, you may get some personal mail from the sheriff 6 months later. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the questions is kind of related, and this is, so at what point can we start to lay people off if we pay people for 12 weeks, regardless of whether they work or not? After that, can we lay them off? And I guess people are probably concerned about firing versus laying off versus, some of that being construed as, if you can't pay the people, there's no work for them to do.
Well, and that's a great question, okay. These 3 COVID laws do not say you can't fire anybody, okay. The government isn't running your business, okay. So if you have a situation where an employee either commits misconduct or is not productive, or if you just have to lay people off because you don't have the money to pay them, you don't have the business. None of those personnel decisions, none of those terminations are a violation of any of these laws. The federal government cannot force you to retain people that you don't want to retain, or keep your workforce 100% if you don't have the money to pay them. However, The danger in that is if you fire somebody in this climate, and if they had previously asked for coverage under one of these COVID laws because they claim they're sick, or they have symptoms and are seeking medical advice, or they have to take care of their kids, they're not going to admit in their lawsuit that the real reason they were terminated was a legitimate business reason. Okay, like you didn't have enough money to pay them, or that they were not performing. They're going to say, oh, that's just a pretext, that's a subterfuge. The real reason you fired me is that I had asked for COVID paid leave or whatever, and then you trumped up these pretextual business reasons after the fact. So I'm giving you a mixed answer, but it's an honest answer. Number one, you can still run your business the way you want to run it. You can lay anybody off for a legitimate reason, or just have a reduction in force because you can't pay them. But beware, if they can connect it to COVID, if they can say the real reason you're doing this is I invoke my rights under one of these three laws, then you're subject to a lawsuit.
Okay. So a follow-up question for that was asked here: if an employee is advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, do we need to ask for, or can we ask for, a doctor's excuse or some kind of documentation?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a good question, because that fits into that. Remember, in slide 7, I said this is the devil's playground on the 80 hours of paid leave, and I'm quoting here from slide 7 is number 3 is experience COVID symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis. Okay, and so that's where this question fits in. And so yeah, you can tell them you want a doctor's slip. But if you say, I want a doctor's slip within the next 24 hours, and if you don't give me that slip in the next 24 hours, you're going to be fired. I think you'll probably end up with a lawsuit. Okay.
Okay.
Next question.
There's a question about we're an essential business. Can an employee use the PSLA for the reason being the quarantine order and not come to work and collect paid leave? They don't mention here that they are a medical business, that they're considered essential.
Yeah, well, that's kind of mixing apples and oranges. And I get this question all the time from my clients. I had a manufacturing client call me up the other day and said, hey, we're manufacturing, we're essential, none of the stuff applies. No, essential just relates to Governor Wolf's order saying you can go to work, who's essential and who's not, okay? That doesn't have anything to do with these 3 federal COVID laws, okay? And so it's really mixing apples and oranges. So let me look at the second question. Go ahead. It says you're essential. Go ahead, Leia.
To continue this though, so they say, the governor says we're under quarantine, and they say, well, I'm not going to come. I don't want to come to work. I don't feel comfortable coming to work, even though we're an essential open business. I want to stay at home and collect paid leave. Can they do that?
No, they can't. That's why I said it's apples and oranges. They just can't say, well, there's a quarantine out there. I mean, that's not precise enough. They have to fit into one of these 6 reasons on slide 7 before they qualify.
Gotcha. Okay. So when trying to figure out if you're under 500 employees for paid sick leave, do you use your current employee count, excluding furloughed employees, or do you use the count of employees you had before the crisis started?
Which slide was it? The count that's slide 5. The count is made when the employee leave is initiated. That's the time.
Okay. All right. Okay, we already talked about the employee being afraid to come to work. Specifically after that, it says they request to be laid off, but you have work. Can they be sued for saying no to a layoff?
No. In a law, we have a term for that. I learned it when I was at Ohio State Law School in 1981. We call that the eggshell victim. In other words, something that normally wouldn't scare an average person scares somebody if they're touchy. And I'm not trying to minimize people's fear, okay? But I've gotten this question, and if somebody is just generally apprehensive about coming to work because they don't want to get infected or whatever, The answer is no, that's not enough. They still have to come. On the other hand, you know, I had a call from a client the other day. I gave him the same advice. I said, you know what, just generally being apprehensive or paranoid or having thin skin, that isn't enough. And then my client said, well, you know, but this employee has a history of lung problems and is afraid that if they get the virus, they're not going to survive it. And I said, wow, I said that from a human standpoint, that makes your question tougher. You don't want to kill somebody, all right? But legally, that is not enough. He has to have some type of documentation, just his general concerns, even if they're well-founded, if they're not supported by medical documentation, or if they're not saying, hey, I have these symptoms and yeah, I'm actively seeking, you know, an appointment with a doctor to get a diagnosis, then no, you could force that guy with lung problems to come to work. And that's a valid order. And if he doesn't, he's subject to discipline up to including termination.
Okay. And the final question, can a day shift worker in a two-parent home be required to work an overnight shift instead of taking leave to care for the child due to school closure?
I'm gonna let Chelsea handle this because I think we just got this question
yesterday
from a client. So we just researched it. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Well, in my reading of this question, it looks like if they're taking the overnight shift, that means that someone would be able to care for the child. So as long as someone is home to care for the child, a child care provider, that could be a grandparent, a co-parent, or anyone who is able to take care of the child, which could be the other parent, they would not need to take the leave to care for their child. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the one we had yesterday.
Yeah, that was the one we had yesterday.
All good questions.
Ooh, this is an interesting one. I don't even know. Would a letter from a psychiatrist be valid for mental health qualified for sick leave if they aren't at risk for COVID, but they have anxiety? How would that, something like a psychiatrist saying this person is not fit mentally to work right now?
Are you reading that somewhere?
Oh, there it is.
Where?
Bottom.
Yeah. Yep, it just came in on the bottom.
All right. Okay. Well, you know what? That's a real interesting question, and I'm going to answer it, but it's kind of an outside the box question. I don't think that's going to fit into the COVID laws, but I think it might fit into the good old American with Disabilities Act. Okay, because you know, having you know, an ongoing documented psychiatric diagnosis is a quote disability under the ADA, and as you guys know, because the ADA has been around for a long time, when somebody's in that situation, you have to give them a quote reasonable accommodation, and I think this might fit into that. So the answer is no, I don't think it fits into the COVID laws, but yes, I think it fits into the ADA, and so I think you got to give them accommodation, and I think you got to pay them. I wouldn't feel comfortable if somebody came in with a letter from a psychiatrist like that, and you say, you know what, I'm not gonna pay you. Now you don't have to pay him forever, but I would not feel comfortable saying no. More at the bottom. I feel like I'm back in law school here.
Yeah. So if the day shift worker declines the overnight work and then feels that they're entitled to leave, so what do you do in that case? So the day shift worker, they could work the night shift because it's available, and they could have somebody care for their child during the day. But they've decided no, they're declining the night shift and saying, no, I want to be paid instead.
The daycare shift declines to work overnight instead. Okay. He declines to work overnight. And again, what's his reason for declining to work overnight?
Because they have the child that they have to care for that would fall under the act.
Yeah.
But they said, okay, well, that's.
Yeah, well, if he has to take care of the kid and there's nobody to take care of the kid, then he's got his foot in the door of the act. And I think under this scenario, yeah, I think he'd be entitled to take leave. I do.
Okay. There's so many questions. So, and I want to thank everybody for this, as well as you guys. If you have to lay off an employee due to lack of work, should you have them sign something stating this? I'm gonna say yes, but you're the attorney.
Well, so many questions are popping up on the screen.
Yes.
I just lost that one here. Where was that one, Chelsea?
Which one?
Just
This is let's see. Goodness.
yeah.
Sorry, Ron Finrock asks if you have to lay off an employee due to lack of work, should you have them sign something stating this?
Ron Finrock.
Yeah, it's on the sorry. I put it on the answered tab. I'm sorry.
Oh, the answer tab. All right, here. Okay, hold on here. Answer tab. Okay. Let me see. Answer is that Ron Finrock. Okay, here you go, Ron. 1:34 p.m. If you have to lay off an employee due to lack of work, should we have them sign something stating this? I mean, this isn't a legal question, but I'd say yeah, just to document it in case you do get involved in a lawsuit. But there's no law that says you can compel him to sign something. But if I'm you, I'm going to say yeah, absolutely. I would document everything, because I told you all the legal pundits are predicting that the lawsuits aren't going to start to hit for 6 to 12 months. And so if you don't write it down, you know, when you're deposed 18 months from now, and some lawyer's hammering away asking you, well, what time of the day did you do this or that? I'd feel a lot more comfortable if you had some documentation. Next question.
Okay. I'm not really sure that you can answer this question, but the banks that they're contacting regarding PPP, including their own bank, told them that they're only going to help business customers who have an existing business loan with them, so the bank loans can still be paid. That's fascinating. If they get more money to offer this again, can anything be done to legislate the banks not to use this program to merely help themselves?
And I'm happy to pass this hot potato to my partner, John Greiner. John, take it away.
Okay. I've talked to 4 different representatives from 4 different banks. The information that I got was that they wanted you to have an account with the bank in order to service your loan, but you didn't have to have an existing business loan with the bank. So I was a little surprised to see that someone was being told this. I do know that the banks were flooded with loan requests, and some of them may have whittled down who they would handle the request for by using the existing business loan criteria. But I know that there are some banks out there that have been telling applicants, we will process your loan request, but we want you to open an account with us if you're not already a regular customer.
I'm
And
impressed, John.
in terms of the legislation, I would suggest that I would suggest taking that up with your congressman or your senator, making them aware that this is becoming a barrier to getting your application in.
Mm-hmm. There's an attendee did say that they sent me an email question that's too long for this box. I did forward it to you, gentlemen, and this has to actually do with calculations to try to figure out if you get the funds, because they're pretty sure that they're going to get the PPP funds, the right calculations to make sure that the loan is forgiven and that you are applying them in the right way, in the proper way. Right now, who should, if you get these funds, who should you be working with to make sure that you're doing the right calculations, you're keeping the right kind of documentation to make sure that these get forgiven properly.
Leia, is this the question from Charles Frederickson at Stanwood Area Federal Credit Union?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, John, do you have that email?
Yes.
Okay. Can you take-
Here's what I would say at this point. The exact formula for how forgiveness will be calculated hasn't been issued by the SBA yet. They've issued what's called an interim final rule. It doesn't have the specific formula. Some of the information that they have posted is not consistent with the CARES Act. So there's a lot of confusion out there at the moment. I mentioned earlier, stay tuned. I think when you get the funds, put them into a segregated account, use them for the specific purposes that are authorized, and be prepared to document that, and then follow up when you receive the loan proceeds and as you are spending them with your accountant or lawyer who is versed in what these particular forgiveness requirements are. That's the best that I can give you at this point because it really is in a state of flux, unfortunately.
Okay.
All right. So I think that's all of the questions that that we have right now. Thank you so much. So again, everyone, we're going to be sending out a copy of the slides of these presentations. This presentation will be recorded and available online so that you're able to continue to go back and watch it, listen to any of these answers. We'll be sending out the digital copy of the labor poster as well. And then you have the contact information for the team, the legal team that's on the phone, as well as my contact information. If you have any questions about the items we discussed today, or if you need links to any additional resources, whether it's a person, an organization, we are all here to help everyone. That's why we jumped on this call today, because we want to help everyone to get through this as unscathed as possible and see if we can actually thrive. So thank you again, gentlemen and ladies, for being on the call. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for being willing to hold this, to help businesses, and wanted to wish you all the very best, because we got some stuff going on, but that's okay. We're gonna come out better on the other side.
Hey, and thanks on behalf of the guys in my firm, Leia. I mean, we're all in this together, and we all need each other, and hopefully we'll live to laugh about this someday. I can't see that happening anytime soon, but hopefully it will happen.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a really great rest of your day.